You have officially summoned a Little Juju podcast. I'm your host, Jujube, author, initiated priestess, griot, and medium, and you've officially entered the portal of all things Africana magic and medicine. If you've ever been curious about the actual roots of voodoo and the healing mysteries of ancestral knowledge, well, you've summoned the right show. Why did our very Christian elders do all these things around the house that I don't remember being in the Bible? Was it just an old wives' tale, or is it rooted in something deeper, something more meaningful, like ritual? Join me as we uncover these truths and chat with some expert spiritualists all across the African diaspora. A new season of A Little Juju podcast is being conjured as we speak, and new episodes will be dropping soon with Spectre Vision Radio every Wednesday. Watch A Little Juju podcast on Spotify and listen wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, all you need is a little juju.
When you get a sec, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. We'll be eternally grateful. Where shadows dance to an unseen waltz and whispers float through cobweb halls, there resides a collector. Not of art, nor of coins, nor of stamps, but something far more spirited. Drawn not to beauty, but to the bizarre, not to the living, but to the lost. He found his calling among the forgotten and the haunted. But as with all collections, there's a time where the collector must finally step away. What happens then? Will these haunted relics remain trapped in their resting places, gathering dust in forgotten corners, or will they slip away into the shadows, lost to time? Welcome to the world beyond the veil. This is Geist. Imagine this, a Victorian home that has stood throughout time, its windows forever flickering with the shadows of the past. One man, drawn by the allure of the eerie and the unknown, decided to call it home. But he didn't stop there. He filled to the brim with artifacts and antiques steeped in history, and objects that seemed to whisper their own dark tales. This is a story of a man who just didn't live with ghosts. He may have invited them in.
I grew up in a single-parent home. We had no money. Everything we had was, second-hand or third-hand or fourth-hand. We couldn't afford anything new. It started out of poverty, if I'm going to be brutally honest. I was accustomed to having used items in the house. When my mom was able to work, she restored furniture, and she was the one that kind of inspired me to say, someone thinks this is a piece of garbage, but with a little bit of, elbow grease, a little bit of know-how, okay, you can have nice stuff too. That was my mom, period. My mom's upbringing. When you refurbish something or you restore something from hand, it means something. It really means something, right? It means more than just buy it out of the store. I had an affinity for used items and the history with these items and this compulsion to kind of maintain history through maintaining the item. She was always saying that to me, one person's trash is another person's treasure. And I never really relinquished that mindset even today.
For a collector of all things historic, it only made sense that Dustin would choose a historic home to house them. And eventually, he found the perfect one.
So I bought the house in 2011. I had been searching for a very specific house. I had been searching for a red brick Victorian home. And even back then, they were getting snatched up pretty quick. But the one house that was not selling was this house in Woodstock. And it was a point of contention with my mom. She did not want me to move to Woodstock. It had sort of a reputation even back then. I watched the price fall so much, I said, okay, I'm gonna go look at this house. So she came along with me, and we were barely in the front door, and she exclaimed, "Oh, I think we found your house," which I laughed at because I said, "You didn't even want me to move here." And that was just a clincher for me. I bought this house in one day. Absolutely didn't know anything about the house other than the previous owners. When I purchased the house, the first thing I did was research the history of the house. I researched the house from the time it was Crown land up until I had purchased it. Originally, the house was Crown land. It was bequeathed by the Crown to a man by the last name of Gibson. And then almost immediately was turned over and sold to a gentleman by the name of Dr. Levi Hoyt Perry. Dr. Levi Hoyt Perry was our city's first physician. He was an American who came up here. There were several families that had owned it for approximately 25, 30 years. One consistency I noticed was that there was a different person living in the home every year. In consulting with my neighbor, whose house was approximately the same age as mine, it gave me reason to believe that this was being used as a rooming house because Woodstock was originally a rail town. So it made sense that if you were a rail employee and you were gone Monday to Friday, you wouldn't need your own house. You just need a place to lay your head for a while. The servants' living quarters on the third floor had a full bath, so that was probably the room that was rented out annually. So I think that's pretty much the history of the house.
Dustin has a beautifully unique approach to designing his home. Every room flows with a sense of continuity, creating an immaculate space where each item is displayed with meticulous care. He even created a room dedicated to the memory of the past residents and spaces honoring the estates of others that he had purchased.
Some rooms are themed rooms. Like the doctor's office. I built that doctor's office on the second floor for Dr. Levi Hoyt Perry. And why don't I just build him his own doctor's office and call it Dr. Perry's office? So I had all this antique medical equipment and so on and so forth. So I built him an office in my house. So that's one of the themed rooms. And there's also Billy's room in the attic, which used to be the full bath of the servants' quarters. Billy was a carpenter, full-time carpenter, and he's also an illusionist. And he made all his own, he was a carpenter, so he made everything by hand. All his feats of magic, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, I'm gonna build him a room in his house, because again, he did a lot of good things for kids, and he was an upstanding human being, and how he went was really sad, but I wanted to celebrate, I wanted to give him a room to celebrate his life. They're specific to my life. They tell a story. Every item tells a story, and some are just a little more specific to my life than others.
Moving into a new home is always an adjustment. The creak of unfamiliar floorboards, the groan of old pipes, the way the walls seem to sigh when the wind hits them just right. New house, old bones. What else could it be?
I didn't know if I was going to be putting it up to first-time homeowner jitters. Again, I was a massive house. I was by myself, and I was in a completely different city. I didn't know anybody. The first week I was here, weird things already started to happen. Doors, closing on their own, electrical issues, this feeling like you're being watched. There were static charges. And again, you think, okay, it's first-time homeowner jitters, but after a while, the accumulation of stuff that was transpiring that had never happened in any of the other homes I lived in, was already starting to pique my curiosity. The very first day that I owned the house, there's nothing in the house other than a donated bed and a donated couch from my mom. First night in the house, and I hadn't explored it fully, so I cracked open the door to the attic, and I pulled open the door, and immediately it's felt like someone had walked right through me. Every hair on my body stood straight up. I got the chills, the temperature dropped. So I said, okay, well, I got to explore the attic. I own this place. Previous owner had left stuff in the attic. It was an old, like 70s television in some rickety old kind of like tweed swivel chair. So I went upstairs, I turned on the TV, I sat in the swivel chair. It seemed like almost every 5 minutes I was looking over my shoulder, it felt like I was being watched. It was just the creepiest sensation. And it's something that I'd never felt before. That was just one of the things that kind of piqued my curiosity.
So he shrugged it off, chalking it up to the oddities of living in a century-old home. But it continued.
The chandeliers in the home, in the entranceway, and in the living room, they are the original brass fixtures. I would be sitting in my chair and I'd be going back and forth from the living room into the kitchen, and I was coming back and I was dropping something off on the coffee table, which is right below the brass chandelier, and I heard a very distinct clink. And I looked up and the chandelier was swaying. The day that I was bringing in all the groceries, the front door at the time, it wasn't set properly in the frame. You would really have to shove the door into the frame to lock it. So I would leave the door open because I was back and forth bringing groceries into the home. On one of my treks back, not only had the door closed on its own, but it had locked. Again, this is a door that's not set into the frame properly. You have to manually shove the door in and it makes a really loud sound. I have absolutely no explanation for that other than to know I didn't do that.
And continued.
I had a psychic medium in the house. She sensed a dominant female presence in the home. The presence that she picked up on, she said it was a very dominant female presence, and it was a very, almost like a Quaker presence, like a very prim and proper presence. She did not like when women who were in the home were kind of disrespectful in her eyes. I can tell you that I've heard a muffled female's voice having a conversation several times. Coincidentally, it was always on a Sunday. It was always on a Sunday morning, and it was coming from the exact same spot, which is at the top of the servant staircase on the second floor. And at the time, I thought it was my ex who was upstairs in the master bedroom, and she had just woken up and maybe she picked up her phone and was talking to somebody. But a week later, it happened again. I distinctly heard an adult female voice having a conversation with someone else at the top of the stairs. Like when I heard those voices, I checked my backyard, I looked out my windows, I was the only one up. That was kind of somewhat disconcerting.
They also communicated in various ways, using a range of distinct sounds.
For all intents and purposes, I called it waving, which involved like the rapping on metal, the rapping on glass. And I just called it waving. It was like, they're just saying, hi, I'm here, rapping on the lamps, the crystals on the lamps. I was in the living room watching television, and I heard footsteps running across the second floor, like running west to the west end of the home and then back to the east end of the home, like a child was playing. They weren't heavy, they were very soft footsteps, but they were running, like something that would sound like a child, not an adult.
This mysterious ghost of a child had a knack of making itself known and would sometimes straight up just say hi.
One time I was in bed and I was asleep at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and I heard a very distinct, and I woke right up. I turned on the light, there was nothing there.
And on another occasion.
And then another time, I woke up in the middle of the night and I was sick, I wasn't feeling well. Something had not set well with me, and I was like, okay, I gotta get to the bathroom. I feel like I might get sick. And I was very discombobulated. I was very dizzy. And I got to outside my bedroom and I started putting my hands on the walls to try and get my balance so I could get to the bathroom. And I was halfway down towards the bathroom and I heard a very distinct, It scared me so bad, but at that point I was like, I just didn't want to get sick on my rug. So I believe there are residual hauntings in the home. I also believe there are intelligent hauntings in the home. I believe that the intelligent hauntings would probably be a woman and the child. I think any of my lodge items located in the attic, I don't have any doubt in my mind that there are brothers and even sisters from lodges that have existed that I may have belonged to or I may have visited time and time again that have taken up residence in the attic. Paranormal XP, when they were the first to really investigate the attic space, which is like the de facto lodge area. They were doing an Estes method. They started spitting out these terms. Two in particular were warden and guard. And they go, what is that? I said, this room in a Masonic lodge, you would have 2 wardens, junior warden, senior warden, and you would have 2 guards, an inner guard and an outer guard. So it made total sense to me. Anyone investigates that room, the attic room, that I'm up there first so they know who I am and that everything that comes up is okay. I'm kind of like the gatekeeper. We had an incident with my mom going up there by herself, and they started scaring her. So she ran out of the room and she didn't go back. Nothing invasive, nothing violent. I've never been pushed. I've never been, shoved, scratched, anything like that. There have been people that have got out of line in the house and woken up with bruises. So I'm very conscious to say when I give a tour of the house or I have company over, please don't poke the bear because I don't want to be responsible if someone gets out of line. And people say, well, are you afraid to live here? No, because as I said, if I've been here this long and they wanted to hurt me, they would have already hurt me.
As Dustin's connection with the house deepened, the house grew increasingly protective of him.
I had an ex living with me years ago. She was mad and yelling at me and finger wagging me. We were standing right next to the gramophone. And as she's screaming at me and yelling at me, the thing just started right up on its own. And she stopped in mid-sentence and she said, did that thing just start on its own? And I said, yep. And then she made a beeline up the stairs and she was gone. Surprisingly, maybe because I had an inkling that the house was haunted, I wasn't even scared. I just kind of went, thank you. You did me a favor.
But she didn't get off the hook that easy.
The next morning when we had woken up and I was downstairs having breakfast, she didn't look like she'd slept. She goes, I got to tell you something. When I woke up in the middle of the night at around 3 o'clock in the morning when you were asleep, and there was a shadow figure standing right over the edge of the bed on my side of the bed. I guess whatever she angered, female presence that was not pleased with her behavior, so.
Then, on another occasion.
It was on my 44th birthday. We were having a party in the basement. A gentleman showed up unannounced. He had a drug and alcohol problem. Well, he didn't want to leave. 2 of the gentlemen that were in the bar got up and basically told him, well, you can leave one of 2 ways. Well, then he left. So that kind of ruined my birthday. Came downstairs to clean up, and the brand new neon sign that I had behind the bar had shorted out. I had a brand new ice machine that I purchased just like a couple weeks ago. It had shorted out. There was water all over the floor. There was this haze that was all over the basement. There were objects that were specific behind the bar that I used to serve drinks that were found in the showroom in the next part of the house that I never moved. As if that wasn't bad enough, I went into the bathroom and used to have this beautiful statue of Christ in the bathroom. It had been turned around to face the wall. So I cleaned everything up, sat down, and I said, listen, if there's someone here, I didn't ask for that to happen, but I can promise you this much, that person is never coming back, and that'll never happen again. And I never had an incident after that in the basement. It was the accumulation of things that just kind of went, wow, like something was not pleased about what happened. So The gramophone thing that happened with my ex, I had told my mom, and you got to understand something about my mom. My mom was a Sunday school teacher, comes from a very, there were ordained ministers in my family. She doesn't believe in ghosts, or didn't believe in ghosts, didn't believe in any of that stuff. So when I told her about the gramophone, she kind of her response was, "Now, Dustin, do you think Jesus would give you a haunted house?" One weekend I was going to Hamilton. I was going to an event. I had to get a hotel. So she would like to come to the house and just hang out with the house, just enjoy it, because she really loves the house.
But then Dustin receives a distressed call from his mother.
So she calls me at the hotel. It's about 10 o'clock at night. And she's whispering, and she's like, "It's moving. It's moving on its own."
It's moving on its own.
And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "The gramophone. It's playing on its own." She was sitting in her leather chair, and she goes, "I was looking at it, all of a sudden it just powered itself up, the arm came out, dropped on the record, and just started playing in front of her." So I was like, "Yeah, I think you kind of owe me and the ghost an apology for that one." There was a period where it was breaking the glass in frames, but it wasn't just in frames, it was in very specific Orange Lodge frames. The first time it happened, I had an Orange Lodge lithograph in the grand staircase. It was massive. I was coming down the grand staircase one day, and there was a very clean crack right down the middle. And I said to my ex, "Did you do that?" She goes, "It wasn't me." I'm like, "Okay." I was going to have the glass replaced. And instead of putting it right in the frame, I didn't have time to do it. You had to take it apart, set everything, make it proper. So I had the glass and I hid it in a part of the house. And I said, "I'll get to it when I get to it." So the glass was in package, it was padded, it was in a safe place, it wasn't going to get knocked around. I was like, "Okay, now I got the time to do it, I'm going to do it." So I reached in, I grabbed the glass. There was a crack identical to the glass that was in the original frame, right down the center of the glass. I was like, "Really? Are you serious? Really?" Another lithograph out of an Orange Lodge. It was a King Billy lithograph. I put brand new wiring on it and everything, so it was really thick hanging wire. I put in new screw hooks. Put it into the wall. Everything was safe. It was fine. The next day, I literally heard a crash. I come down, and that frame, that Orange Lodge picture, was on the ground. So someone had literally just, yanked it off the wall and dumped it on the ground. So I just thought it was kind of coincidental that it was always Orange Lodge related. So it always made me wonder if the ghost was Catholic. It was a pattern. Like, I noticed patterns in the house. The tapping, it was always tapping the glass, tapping of metal for a while, and then, okay, we're going to move on to frames. We're going to damage this stuff. It was just mischievous stuff, but it was very specific mischievous stuff in patterns.
And of course, it wouldn't be a haunted house without the ever-watching presence of shadow people.
Most of my time in the living room, which in Victorian parlance is like the drawing room. And when I'd be sitting in that chair, it faces the dining room. And you would see this shadow just kind of creep out from around the corner of the dining room. So if you stood up and you started walking towards that shadow, you would see it recede. Most of the time it likes to do this is when I've shut off most of the lights. Nothing invasive has ever come as a result of that. I don't feel threatened. It's just like someone's checking me out to see what I'm doing. The other instance that scared the hell out of me, the one and only time that I ever saw an actual shadow figure. I was going into the attic and I got to the top of the stairs. So you're entering that little walkway to get to the light switch to turn on the main house lights. And I was reaching for that particular switch, and I saw it was darker than dark, and it looked tall, lanky, and it was hunched over, and it just made a beeline right across from me. Whoever's in here went behind the bar. And I threw my hands up because I'm like, oh my God, someone's in the room. I flicked the switch on, there's nothing there. The servants' living quarters is one big entire room. So I said, okay, there's nowhere for you to hide. You know, make it easy on yourself, come out. Nothing. I have all my ceremonial swords up there. I grabbed a sword. So I went behind the bar. There was nobody there.
A short while later, Dustin was watching a paranormal investigation show, and what they captured on camera shed new light on the chilling experience he had had in the attic.
And they were filming in an old, I think it was a tuberculosis sanatorium in upstate New York, and they caught one of them on cameras. Like, oh my God, that's exactly what I saw, and it even moved the exact same way that I saw the thing in my attic move.
Over the years, Dustin has expanded his collection by attending estate sales and auctions. Along the way, he's acquired items that turned out to be far more than what they seemed.
So I've acquired multiple haunted items from well-documented locations like the Don Jail, Kingston Penitentiary, Lakeshore Psychiatric Facility. There are several pubs like the Frog and Firk, and I got stuff out of that. Items that, used to reside at the old Toronto Central Prison. That was my most recent acquisition. Probably my favorite. I have the old operating and lobotomy table out of the old Lakeshore Psychiatric Hospital. If I had to pick one favorite, that would probably be my favorite.
I mean, don't we all have our favorite haunted items in the house? And what's a haunted collection without a haunted doll?
That particular doll, I acquired that from a gentleman who was he was a Mason and a fellow Shriner. Went down to purchase some of his antiquities. He was up there in age. He was starting to consolidate his collection. So when I got there and I met him and we started talking and we shared stuff in common, he mentioned to me that he owned the old Carbide Wilson house in Woodstock. He purchased that house. The attic was filled with antiques. And the doll was up there. Encased in glass. There was a sign on it that said, "Beware, never open." It was on a bed of salt and everything was sealed. I bought a bunch of stuff from him and he kind of intimated, I'm getting up there in age. You want to take the doll. And I said, okay. I said, I'll be the new curator. He goes, you got to promise me you're never going to open it. You're not going to let anyone open it. I said, no, I won't. To this day, the doll remains in the psychomantium of the house. Occasionally, I will take it out for shows. But I had taken out the doll at the Witches Vale Night Market in London. And I had the doll there. And this little gentleman came by, Hispanic in his 30s. And very quiet, and he looks at the doll and he asked me, he goes, can I touch it? And I was like, okay. I mean, normally I don't want people to touch my stuff, but he seemed nice enough. So he picked it up and he was looking at it and he was like bringing it up to his face. And he put it down. And then he'd walk around the table and then he'd come back and he'd pick it up again and he'd look at her. And he'd put her up to his ear and then he'd put it down. He repeated this process for like an hour and a half. It was really weird. It was almost like he was completely hypnotized by the doll. Spent most of my show eyeballing him as opposed to answering questions about all the items I had in my collection because, I didn't know what he was going to do. Yeah, that was an interesting night, that's for sure.
There has been only one instance of someone witnessing a full-bodied apparition in the house, and it wasn't Dustin.
What had happened was I had a friend, and it was just him and I was behind the basement speakeasy. That's where all my crime-themed, haunted-related items are. He was seated at the pub table, and the pub table faces the entrance of the bar. So you could see straight from the back of the bar through that window into the laundry room. I remember sitting there and I seen him kind of look, and he had this weird look on his face, and he kind of leaned out. And he goes, "We're alone, right?" And I said, "Yeah, of course we're alone." He goes, "Someone just walked into your laundry room." We got up, we ran to the laundry room. Now remember, the laundry room, there's only one way in and out. So I got to the laundry room, there was no one there. And I said, "Are you sure?" He goes, "I'm telling you." He goes, I saw a guy, he had black hair and it was like gelled back. So he had a white shirt on with a black tie. He had a black suit jacket. He looked like a butler. This particular gentleman, a good portion of his job is to detect people with mental illness, if they're drug impaired, they're alcohol impaired. So he's not a very histrionic personality. He's very stoic, he's very analytical. So when he saw it, I'm kind of like, okay, now I'm definitely not losing my mind. I've had people tell me it's not a good idea. Here's how I look at it. I'm very much a person of faith. So, I don't have the fear that some people will have of objects that may have like negative attachments to them. Okay, I don't have that. It never occurred to me to not bring the items into my own home. I just never had that fear, and I never had that worry. And I don't think that'll ever change, to be brutally honest. Like, I look at myself as a curator for these items, because not everyone should be doing this. Because unless you're willing to treat it with respect, unless you're willing to be a full-time caregiver to it, then again, you don't even start. You don't even entertain the notion. In the 13 years that I've been building this house and accumulating my collection, I think whatever's here, if there are attachments to items of that particular magnitude, they understand he's telling her a story. It's a museum in his home. I would hope that there would be somebody, and I wouldn't care if they were a relative, I wouldn't care, someone just come in and take possession of the house or the items in the house and just keep it going. But at the end of the day, it's not up to me. When you're dead and gone, that's it. It's sad. I mean, when I think about it, it's sad, because I said this whole house and the collection and the refurbishing of items and, the miles on the road, the time, the money, sweat, and tears. It's a labor of love. But I'm here for a reason, so. Until then, it's under my watch.
A very special thanks to Dustin for inviting us to his home and sharing his story. Would you like to visit Wade Manor? Book a tour of the house on their Instagram account at Wade_Manor_Woodstock. You won't regret it. Or maybe you will. Do you have a story you've been hiding? Submit it to us at hello.geist.podcast@gmail.com. Both recorded and written submissions are welcome. Geist is written and edited by Danielle Matar. Original music and FX by Beau Jensen. Mixing and sound is by Adam Esker. Geist's logo is by Jake Carruthers. Follow us on all social media platforms at Geist_podcast or at Geist Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, sleep tight.
Now receiving frequency transmission.
One of the most interesting ideas about ghosts was proposed by Andrew Lang, who was a fascinating polymath and author. He was one of the co-founders of the Society for Psychical Research, who took one of the first sort of forensic and scientific approaches to gathering and cataloging accounts of ghosts. And in 1897, he collected them in an amazing volume called The Book of Dreams and Ghosts. And in the Book of Dreams and Ghosts, Lang proposed the unique idea that ghosts may be the effect or the emanation caused by a dead person dreaming, and in effect projecting into the mind of those living. And that's a fascinating concept, that when you encounter what seems to be a ghost, you may actually be making contact with a dead person dreaming.
Transmission complete. Stay tuned to Spectrovision Radio. Stay.